This video is anchored and patterned from Pivot for a Learner's Material, Quarter 2, English for Grade 7, which was published and distributed by the Department of Education, Region 4A, Calabarzon.
Hello dear learners! Once again, I am Sir Florencio Montenegro, your English teacher, and welcome to another day of exploring the new world of English. Okay class, I have here a picture and a video of a tree. What can you say about a tree? How are you going to describe it? Can you associate tree to life? How will you relate tree to life? When describing something, we often resort to making comparisons to establish a clear idea of what we are trying to describe or explain. There are many types of comparisons in the English language. Comparing objects or ideas is a common practice, especially in writing. While there are many types of comparison that one can make through usual figures of speech like simile and metaphor. There are also literary techniques or devices that can show and provide a more detailed comparison of things and ideas. One example of this is a technique that is commonly called as analogy. It is a literary technique that involves comparison of two things are alike, but with the ultimate goals of making a point about this comparison. Although often quite similar or related with simile and metaphor, an analogy is not a figure of speech. It is a rhetorical device used to make additional arguments and supports ideas by showing connections and comparisons between two unlike things. The main function of analogy is not just to show, but to explain or justify. We already discussed last quarter the difference between simile and metaphor. You already know that simile and metaphor is under the figures of speech. Now class, simile and metaphor, we are using these figures of speech to compare two unlike things. The only keyword you can get from the simile is the word as or like. And metaphor, we don't have as or like, but still, we are comparing two things. So for example, class, look at this. Life is like a tree. What can you say? We have here the word like, meaning to say this is simile. You got it right. How about the second example? Life is a tree. We are comparing our life to a tree. And that is, yes, it is a metaphor. We don't have the word as or like, but still we are comparing two unlike things. Very good. Now, class, that we know the difference between simile and metaphor, we will now proceed to the rhetorical device that is the analogy. Analogy is our lesson for today. So now, class, what is the example here? Life is just like a tree. It starts from a seedling that grows into a full-grown tree that has trunk and branches that make itself strong and bears wonderful fruits. Generally, there are two types of analogies commonly employed in writing. First, analogies that identify identical relationships. This type of analogy takes the form A is to B as C is to D, and is often used to directly illustrate similar relationship between two pair of words, often for the purpose of logical argument. Example, English is to language as mathematics is to arithmetic. The example above vividly shows the connection between English and language and mathematics and arithmetic. Typically, class, English is a subject that focuses on language, and mathematics deals primarily with the arithmetic. We also have here the second type of analogies, the analogies that identify shared abstraction. This form of analogy compared two things or concepts that are technically unrelated in order to establish a connection between a characteristic that they share. This type is common and useful in writing because it can make abstract ideas and concepts more concrete. Example, what soldiers do for the country, white blood cells do inside the body. In the given example, the abstract concept of how white blood cells function in the body is made clear by explaining that they protect everything inside, like how soldiers perform their sworn duty to protect their country or our country. In writing, analogies play the function of making abstract concept more concrete, adding depth and feeling to an image, and describing and making a point to establish an argument. Okay, class, now that you know the difference between simile and metaphor, now that you know that analogy is a kind of a rhetorical device, and now that you know that there are two types of analogy, we will now proceed with our learning task 1. Okay, class, for learning task 1, you are going to read, you are going to examine, and you are going to classify each sentence below as to simile, metaphor, or analogy. You are going to write your answers in your notebook. Now that we're done doing learning task 1, we will now proceed with our learning task 2. So in learning task 2, we are going to identify which of the statements below are true about analogy. In your notebook, you're going to write go if the statement is correct and no if it says otherwise. Using available resources like books or magazine, you're going to look for at least 5 examples of analogies that identify shared abstraction to describe or make a point. Write your answers in your notebook. Note, if you have a way to connect to the internet, you may also look for an example in web pages. Okay, class, after doing the learning task 1, 2, and 3, we are now down to our second to the last activity. What are we going to do in this activity? Let's find out. So, you're going to think or look for at least one popular song or poem which contain analogies. Provide a copy of the song or lyrics or the song lyrics or poem in your notebook and underline as many analogies as you can find. Learning about how analogies are different from other types of comparisons used in English can be confusing. It is important for you to understand how each type of comparison aims to function in sentences and larger units of discourse. To check your comprehension of the discussions and examples provided, complete the sentences below by filling in the blanks with the missing terms. Choose your answer from the options provided below. Write your answer in your notebook.
Clap.
Thank you, class, for listening. Once again, I am Sir Florencio C. Montenegro, your English teacher, and see you, class, in our next learning episode. Mabuhay!